Welcome back to the studio, friends. Today I get to do something that's really fun for me. I get to start a new project, and I've been working on Block of the Month programs for a long time. I remember when I first started quilting, it was one of my favorite things to do because you get to spend a little bit of time with the project each month whenever you have time. And then at the end of the year, you end up with a really fantastic project that you really had parceled out into smaller bits. It allows you to work on something whenever you have the time, and they were usually like really exciting once you got all the pieces together. Sometimes the little bits and pieces might not have been as exciting, but the impact of the final project was like really wow. So I've always really liked Block of the Months, and we get to do another one starting today. We're going to be working on the on-the-road applique kit, and for me this is like a retro feeling project, so I tried to find fabric that also had a little bit of a retro vibe to it, which is why I chose this kind of aqua teal fabric. It's just a solid fabric. I could have done this in batik, and that probably could have worked good too if I had found the right color combination. But I found solids, which are very easily found in just about every neck of the woods. I got these at my local quilt shop, and they're just Kona solids. But Moda also has some really great solid fabric that you could work with. But you could pick your, whatever personality fabric suits you. I mean, that's the whole great thing about doing a Block of the Month, is that you get to put your little bit of a spin on it. We finished up the dog part and alley cat, which you saw on the intro. I finished that up a couple months ago, and I have been seeing on different Facebook pages different people putting their spin on that pattern. One of them that I saw, they had used, I believe, either the paper pattern or the SVG files, and they used their own fabric, and they made them a lot more colorful, and it made the impact completely different. It was very funky. So we always appreciate seeing what happens with our designs when they get into your hands. That's one of the exciting things about seeing what people do with the product. So these, again, the majority of our files you can get as a paper pattern. You could get it as a SVG download, which would be for a Brother scan and cut or a Cameo silhouette. You would fuse your own fabric with some type of fusible material. We usually use Steam 2, and then you would run it through your machine with our digital file, and it would cut out the pieces in the size that you chose. That's one of the things about the SVG files. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. So scalable means that you can size them up or down. So that's one of the fun things with some of the designs. You can increase or decrease depending on the size of your machine. That would determine the size that you could create the designs in. We always have the paper pattern. This particular one for the kit has all of the cutting instructions, which we will be doing in a few minutes upstairs. Has the cutting instructions, the assembly instructions, and all of that information. And then each of the kits for the 10 different blocks of this kit have the laser cut and pre-fused applique shapes in the background. So what you see on the color cover is what you would be getting for each of the kits. The fabric would match that paper cover sheet. So I have all 10 of my blocks here, all the packages with all the laser cut and pre-fused paper. All I have to do is get my pieces ready, and then it will just be a matter of peel, place, and press each month. And so it'll be a very fun project. Because of the ease of this, you could incorporate a wide range of age levels as well as skill levels. This type of applique was meant to have a great impact even if you're a beginner and have never used it before. You're going to have crystal crisp edges, perfect shapes, and a great representation of the design even if you've never done it before. That's because these pieces are all laser cut. They don't need any additional cutting. They already have the fusible material. We just have to place them. You do have a paper placement guide in each packet that shows you where the pieces go, and then it just has to be fused. You do use steam, as the fusible name indicates. It's steam, a steam 2, and so we do need steam in the product. Process of fusing it. I use a spritz bottle and my iron, and that makes the process easy. So I'm going to pull you in a little bit closer just so you can see what each of the months look like and what my fabric looks like for the background, my inner border and outer border. I've already got it all picked. Doesn't mean I won't change my mind, but I have it all picked right now. So let's pull you in and let you take a look at what we have so far, and then we can get upstairs and start cutting. The kit always comes packaged nicely. This particular one comes in a clear kind of hard plastic case. Has the color cover sheet on the front and your fabric requirements on the back. We also have our full pattern instructions here. That will give us all of the cutting for the blocks for each month, the inner border and the outer border size. Again, you could adjust those a little bit as you saw fit. And then we'll go through some of the different blocks that you could see for the on the road kit. That one's number 8. The full floral across the bottom, that's number 7. Number 6 is the little Vespa pulling the camper. Number 5 is Home Sweet Home, the house. Number 4 is another little floral spray. The van in block 10, the van with the dragonfly, some of our daisy dots with the little chickadee, the love bug, and again the floral daisy dots with the chickadee. And that will make up the whole year. You can see that I chose for my background kind of a light teal, light aqua color, and I think when you look at the colors on there, I think it's going to look really pretty. It's not going to be quite as high contrast as just on a white background, but I still think it's going to be very pretty. So in the background, the inner border, and this is a little bit more electronica than it is retro, but I really liked the way it picked up all of the colors for this, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. It may also end up being the binding for the quilt. So let's get this stuff put away so I don't get it mixed up, and all I need is my instructions. I can leave my kits down here, and I can take the fabric upstairs and get it pressed and start getting the blocks cut. Looks like we have at least, there could be 3 or 4 different types of blocks on here, so I'm glad I have the cutting instructions. So we'll get upstairs and we'll start cutting with a rotary cutter. So we're upstairs in my very messy piecing studio. I always try and keep it clean, but there's just no point really. There really is just no point. Those of you who could keep a clean studio, I really admire your tenacity. I just cannot do it. A glance around my room really would be kind of like a look inside my mind, because I feel like everything's very organized and I know where almost everything is, but it's messy up here. I admit it. I don't know that I'd have it any other way though. As soon as I clean it, it gets messy right away. I have ironed my background fabric. It was really wrinkly. I've already washed it. I'm a big advocate of washing fabric. If it's going to shrink or fade or bleed, I want to know at the beginning, not at the end. So, and it's not that I wash really heavily all my quilts when they're finished, but if something happens when they get washed, I want to know. I want to know now. So I've done that. Fabric's all washed, and also I'm a big advocate of ironing. Did you know that you could be off as much as a ½ inch or more if you go ahead and cut fabric that isn't really ironed precisely from the start, all of those little tiny micro wrinkles and pleats in the fabric take up space. And in the long run, the longer the piece is, the more off your measurement could be. So whether it's small piecing for a block or an inner border or an outer border, I always iron. I iron it as crisp as I can, and I use some kind of spray, best press or starch, something just to help keep it neat and flat as I'm cutting, because I want those pieces to be accurate. Even blocks like this, which are, you know, if they were off a little bit when you assembled them, it's not going to be a huge thing because there's only 10 blocks in the whole top. But still, it's a good practice to get into. You don't want to incorporate bad habits from the beginning. And this is an easy enough project that that's a step that I wouldn't want to skip over. Even when I cut my blocks and pull them out later, you'll hear me say as the months go on that I will re-iron the block to get out any micro wrinkles, because I don't want that wrinkle to amplify through the applique itself. So I always iron. And what I'm going to do now, I have my cutting sheet here on the instruction booklet, and it tells you how to cut these pieces. And basically I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have to cut 5 strips of fabric from my 1.5 yard background. I actually think I have 2 yards because I always like to err on the side of extra. I have 5 strips to cut, and then those will be subcut into the blocks. And then I'll put those aside, and as the months progress, we'll be using each of these blocks. What I'm also going to do, the width of fabric is here, and so I'm going to fold the fabric back on top of itself the same way it was when it was on the bolt, so that the 2 selvages are overlapping and the fold is in the middle. And I'm going to cut the strips that way. That's the way the instructions show it. So I'm going to change the camera about so you can see more of the table and less of me. And I'm going to fold my background fabric the way it was off of the bolt and get ready for some cutting. As I said, I have my paper that has the diagram for the cutting. You can see the selvages here, and my selvage is actually here. The 2 selvages are laying on top of each other. So I'm going to cut my strips, and it has the size of the strip at the top of each row. So I have 2 that are 8.5, 1 that's 9.5, 1 that's 10.5, and 1 that's 12.5. So I have 5 strips to cut, and then after I cut each strip, I'm going to subcut the blocks that I need from each section. You'll see I have 3 blocks from the first one, only 2 from the second strip, 1 from the third strip. That's probably the long floral piece here. And then 2 from here and 2 from here. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting those. I'm going to try and pay attention, because a lot of times when I'm videotaping and cutting, I make stupid little mistakes because it's hard to concentrate on 2 things. So I'm going to do something that I don't like to do, and that is I'm going to try and not talk so much while I'm cutting. I know that may be a little bit boring to watch, but I have to concentrate. So I'm going to do 2 8.5, and I will say this ruler is 8.5 inch ruler. So if I give myself a fresh cut here at the beginning, I can do 2 strips just with the width of the ruler. So I'm going to do my first one, my first clean cut. And for those of you who are just starting to sew, whenever you use a rotary cutter, it's a 3-part system always. You need a self-healing mat, which is a special mat for a rotary cutter. You need some kind of a ruler to keep the edge of the rotary cutter, and then you need the rotary cutter itself. Now this is as sharp as a surgical steel blade. If it's left open like this and falls off the table, it can cut through your shoe into your foot. So we always want to keep them closed when we're not using it. Don't set it down open and then put papers over it and you pick it up with your hand and you cut yourself. So you have to be careful with that, but it is a 3-part system, and somewhere along your life, you'll see some people cut without a ruler to do specialty types of blocks, free-form blocks. But normally, even with that, it's a two-part. You have to have a mat and a ruler. So we have our first two strips that are 8.5. That was easy because the ruler is 8.5 inches. The next one is 9.5, so all I have to do is move my ruler over 1 inch from the beginning, and I can use the edge of the ruler again. The next one's going to be 10.5, so I could use the same ruler again, but I'm going to leave 2 inches at the beginning. And then the last one is 12.5. So we need 4 inches at the beginning of the ruler. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strips. I can put the rest of my fabric away for any mistakes that I might make. Could also be used for binding if I wanted a light binding. Might be good for a sleeve on the back of the quilt. And I'm going to start subcutting. I had this folded to cut my strips, but I'm going to open it back up now. And I'm even going to iron out that little bit of a pleat that we've gotten. Now I'm going to cut, look at how that wrinkle just keeps coming back. I'm going to cut my first pieces, 13.5, 12.5, and 12.5. So I want to get the edge lined up with one of the lines on the mat. That just helps me make sure that I'm cutting nice square shapes. I'm going to pull this over just a little bit to get me a clean cut. And then I'm going to do my first strip. So 13.5, 12.5, 12.5. If that one is 12.5, I could do the exact same thing just to get an idea where that goes. I can measure them to make sure that I did it right. So I have two 12.5, and now I need one 13.5. And each step of the way, I'm going to double check my work. That'll be my first strip. And the scraps, these little scraps, I don't know what you do with yours, but I put mine in a pile. When I go to my local quilt guild, I give these to one of the ladies who works with scrap quilts. I've got enough little pieces laying around. I don't need more scraps. So again, I'm lining up my edge with the line on a mat. And I'm going to do a clean cut at the beginning. That little scrap I just throw away. And on this one, all I need is a 12.5 and an 8.5. So I'll do my 12.5 first. And then I'll do an 8.5. And that's the strips for my second piece. Now you can see I have a pretty big piece here. I'm still going to put that in the scrap pile. My next strip is easy. It's just a 33.5. That's going to be the width of the whole inside body of the quilt. This piece is the block that has the floral spray at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that piece off. That goes in the garbage. And now I'm going to have to do a little bit of counting. 33.5. So I have 24, 25, 6, 7, 8, 9, 31, 32 and a half. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm trying to be so careful, but every time I cut, I think I'm being careful on video. And then I find out I've made a stupid mistake. So I'm on my 4th strip. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, lining up the edge on the flat line of the mat. And we just need 2 blocks, a 21.5 and a 12.5. So I'll do my fresh cut. Only 2.5. And a 12.5. Little piece for the scrap pile. Another piece for my next row. And now I'm on my very last strip. Let's see, we have a 16.5. This one, once I cut, it's finished. The next one is a subcut. So I'm going to cut the next piece, also 16.5. But then I have to turn it around and cut it down to 9.5 inches. So I'm going to line up the 2 edges on the mat line, and I'll measure that 9.5 and subcut that down. And that concludes all of the pieces that I need for this block. This quilt. So you could at this point go ahead and label each of the pieces, which I might do after I shut the video off. That way I don't panic when it's time to use the blocks. I always pick up the wrong one and think I've measured everything wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and layer these the way that they would be with block numbers, and I can take them back downstairs and get them set up with the kit. And we're all ready now to start doing some applique blocks, which we'll do month by month. Again, I will iron each of these pieces right before I do my applique on it to make sure that they're perfectly flat, and I'll show you that as the months progress. Well, that wraps up my cutting instructions for the on the road block of the month. If you join me back for the next video in this series, we're going to go ahead and get started on block number 1. We already have our blocks cut, so I'll start with just pressing the block off, getting the pattern out, laying all the pieces out as I normally do, and going through the fusing process. Before you know it, though, we'll be at the end of this series and we will be putting this quilt together and getting it quilted. I like all the steps in this process. Selecting the fabric for the background and the borders, getting them all pieced together, and getting them quilted. I like to see new samples up in the room because, believe it or not, I'm in here a lot more often than you are, and I like to see things shifting around. So I'll be looking forward to having a new sample done. By the time this one gets on its way, we'll also have the hummingbird garden quilted and hung up in here as well. So thanks for stopping by the studio today. I want to thank all of you who have been subscribing or liking the page. That's really important to us. With the algorithm, it helps to increase the view. It lets other quilters know that we're here, and we always thank you for your support. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time here in the Urban Elements studio. Those are really going to need to be financed.